130 people with no bosses, too good to be true. This is my workplace. We're called Vertica, and we are 130 people, and we have no appointed management. What I love about being at Vertica is that I can actually have an impact here. I can change things, but is it too good to be true? Maybe you can help me with that. First, a little about me. My name is Helle Markmann. I'm a process and behavioral design geek. I'm a Scrum Master and an Agile coach and a Lean fan. Also, I had different roles in my work life. I've been a technical consultant, a team lead, a middle manager, a Scrum Master, a process consultant, an Agile coach, a project manager, and a product manager. At the moment, I have the title of project manager. Privately, I'm a knitter and a sustainable flower farmer. You can see the beautiful knit sweater there. Also, I can tell you that knitting is actually one of the things that I guess Imran Rashid would suggest you all do to get rid of some of all the digital things that's happening. So I could definitely just contact me afterwards if you need some tips. Also, I'm the mother of 3 boys. That means I'm the closer of closets and drawers all the time. I have a master's in computer science from Aarhus University from 2003. I want to start out with a question. And this could be a bit risky, because maybe the answer will make my talk totally irrelevant. I hope not, I'll be surprised, but let's see. So please raise your hand if you ever had a direct boss you were not happy with. It doesn't have to be the one you have now, but just in your work life. Okay, I would say that's actually about 70% or something. So also raise your hand if you worked somewhere where you weren't happy with the top management. Yeah, that's also quite a bit, 60, 70% maybe. Okay, and then raise your hand if you ever had a boss that made a difference in a good way. That's also a lot. Yeah, that was actually almost 100%. Well, I didn't see you guys, but let's just say, yeah, thanks. So at least that's quite a few of us. So a good boss really makes a difference. And for me, being happy at work is very important. So, because we are spending so much time there. And I don't know if all of you heard the talk this morning, the keynote, but for me, that's just right in. I'm so happy that he was before me, because then he can sort of build in on some of my some of the things I want to say. But there are many ways to make a good workplace. And the one we're doing in Vertica, that's just one of them. So at least that's what I think. Yeah, so what are you going to hear? When I was preparing for this talk about my workplace, I asked some of my old friends to hear what they thought would be interesting to hear about. And they gave me some feedback. And why is it important to challenge our organizations? So why not all get rid of the bosses? Because they're really nice. They support you and they protect you. Next one. How are you actually doing it? So how does it feel different? What are you doing in the daily life? Who makes decisions? And what about the big decisions? How are you making them? And the third one, what are the challenges? Because of course there are some challenges. What is difficult? So why is it important to think about how we organize? For me, this is, as I said, about being happy. Work should be a good part of our life. Sure, sometimes it's hard and there's stuff you need to do, but overall you should feel good about your work. When I started my first job, I worked really hard. I wanted to do my best. I wanted to finish all the tasks I got, and whenever someone came and asked me something, I wanted to do that as well. And of course, to have an empty mailbox. That's the best thing. So, and when I think back on that, I thought that when I got the job, that someone had sat down and actually judged that this is a one-man job. This is a job for one person. So a bit like school, where someone makes a course and they're like, okay, this is a course for one semester, and that will probably fit for the students. But it's not at all like that. It's more like there's a big amount of work, and then you have to find out yourself which part of that work is yours. And the only one that can actually help you do that is yourself, right? So, and I didn't realize this till much later. And actually, it's also funny because a lot of people have this misunderstanding, but it's also the other way around. So when we come to someone at our workplace and ask them to do something, we expect them to say no if they don't have the time or if they have enough work, but we also know that we won't say no ourselves a lot of the time. So there's this thing about work, it's kind of difficult. So, but after a while, I became a team lead, and then I became a middle manager, and there is a lot of work being a middle manager. Everybody wants something from you. So I worked weekends and when the kids were asleep and all that. But when you're a manager, you have the responsibility of other persons, at least their work lives. And I felt that this was my new purpose. So I had to find out in the situation I was in where people were depending on me and how could they be more happy in their work life. Also because the thing about the mailbox, that's a total utopia, you probably know this. So I got occupied with delivering value through others. So one thing is what will you do in your own work life, but when you have the power to do something about other people's work life, that's very important that you use this power good, at least in my opinion. I really loved being a manager, actually. I think it was great, all the people part at least. Not so much the political parts or the backstabbing parts and what else you have, but and not the expectations that you are supposed to work all the time. But the rest I really liked, and actually I believe that you can be a good manager without all the dumb stuff, but that's just my opinion. So I have another question. So how many of you ever changed a job? That's actually all. Okay, and how many of you changed your job because of a manager? A third, maybe? Okay. Proves my point still. Because the changing of job because of a manager is on the top 5 list of why we change jobs. So management is actually important also for the workplace. So is it a good solution to get rid of them? Let's see. The way we think and talk about work. So does anybody know this guy on the left? No, that's okay. His name is Frederick Taylor. And you see him there, he has a stopwatch looking at this lady working. In the end of the 19th century, he came up with something called scientific management. He measured work, he measured shovel sizes and barrel sizes to find out how could you be most efficient. Also, he measured time and how long time each step in a process or some work took. And then also he could decide, well, it's better if this person only do this task and then the next person do this task instead of you doing all the things. I guess you can see where this leads. Of course, he wanted us to be more efficient, or us, the people working in the factories at that time. And it actually makes good sense, especially when with manual work, that you try to find out not to wear people down. For example, having a too heavy barrel to run with all the coal or whatever they do. So it's a good idea to do these things, depending on your motives, of course. Today's work is different. You probably all know this. But sometimes some people are still talking about work in this way, in this scientific way, as if we can measure it. And I'm glad again what Rashid said this morning about we can also, it's not free to use our minds, it's also a muscle that gets very tired. So it's like people talk about it in the way as if there is a linear connection between how many man hours you put into some work and how many you get out. But you all know this, it's not, it's much more complex. And the important thing is to challenge the way we talk about work in our organization, is to challenge this way of Excel sheet thinking. Of course, we still have to understand bottlenecks and flows and queue and all that, but the Excel sheet way, where we just think that we can, if people are more efficient, we can put more work into them, or maybe we could put some extra persons, and then we'll have more work in the other end. We know that's not how it works. And I got very interested in this, and long story short, I ended up at Vertica. So to give you some context on what Vertica is, I have some facts, and also it lets you compare to something you might know a bit. So Vertica, we have, as I said a couple of times, 130 employees. We do e-commerce, business to business and business to customer, so that's web shops, basically. It's established in 2001 by 5 guys. They had no specific vision about organization structure. They just had a wish for being effective without the fuss. And then actually in the first year, the organization evolved sort of organically from that. We're situated in Aarhus, where the headquarters is, and in Copenhagen. I work there since November 2021, so not that long. We have 16 customer teams and a number of organizational groups. I'll come back to that. Our turnover is 130 Danish kroners. Result is 22 a year. I think this is 2 years old. And a profit margin on 16.7%. So let's have some example of what we actually do. Meaningful affected. This is a term we use a lot, and I'll give you some examples. Example 1. Helle is invited to give a talk about our organization at a conference. That's me. But I'll start the story somewhere else. Some years ago, a friend of mine wanted to do a talk about a former workplace where we both were. And it was about the agile transformation they were going through. It was very interesting because it was a very big company, and they were sort of they had lots of learnings that others could learn from, of course. And it also, in my eyes, promoted the company as someone who wanted to do some things different. She's a very skilled and experienced conference talker, so I'm sure she would do quite good. But what she did was, of course, she asked the manager, and she also said, well, if you don't want me to take the name, use your name, we can leave it out in the presentation, I can still do a good presentation. But the manager had to ask their manager, of course, and they probably had to ask their manager, I don't know, it was a quite hierarchical organization. And at this level, it probably wasn't the highest priority to make this decision, because maybe they didn't even know her, and maybe they didn't know what this agile transformation in some part of the company was, or at least it took quite a while before she actually got her answer, and the answer was no. And she didn't get any good explanation about this. And anyways, when she got the answer, it was much too late because, well, time had passed and she hadn't prepared and all that stuff. So back to this example where I'm giving this, invited to give this talk. So what I did was I asked some of the members of my team what they thought of this idea, that me giving a talk about this, and they loved it. They thought this is a very good idea. And then I asked one of my colleagues, so who else should I ask? Shouldn't I get permission to do this in some way? And he was like, no, you don't have to ask anyone. We trust that you're doing a good job, and just you're telling about us with respect. So the ones I asked were the meaningful affected, since they would be affected about me spending some time preparing for this, and it would, of course, also affect them how I present our workplace to others. And they trusted me to do a good job. Next example. Anne, the front-ender at the Bolia team, thinks the checkout flow on their web shop is slow and could be modernized. So what she does is she asks the UXer, and the UXer agrees. And then they ask the project manager, how would this fit in the plan, and suggesting to work on a new flow and such, how would that be? And she thinks it's okay, the project manager, and then they present the idea to a mock-up to the customer, and it gets approved. Third example. Bob have looked into the newest Umbraco update, and he thinks that Molslinjen could have advantage of getting this. So Bob consults with the team. They agree it's a good idea. But to make sure that it's also a good strategy for Vertica, Bob asked the tech driver group, which is a group of colleagues with a special interest and knowledge in technology, and they meet, I think it's once a week or twice a month, something, and discuss strategies for the technology in Vertica. They also agree that it's a good strategy for Vertica to go in this direction. So Bob and his team, they make a draft for a plan, and they present it to the customer. In this plan, there's also some licenses and some education and other expenses for Vertica, so it's also an investment for the company. Decisions should be made close to where it will affect and where the competence is. This is the point. And this is the point of the meaningful affected. The phrase we use normally is, depending on the situation, but you have to gather 2 to 3 meaningful affected, or in Danish, meningsfuldt berørte, and then you can make a decision. Some of these examples could probably also be present in some of your workplaces or in a normal organizations. I couldn't tell, but especially if you have like a small company or a high level of self-management. So I've tried to find some of the examples that I think couldn't. So we have John and Kim is in a room where the sun hits the TV screen in the afternoon, and Kim has problems to connect his Mac to the Teams meeting. The struggle is real. I've been here. So what John does is he contacts the facility group, and they together decide that blinds should be brought to the room and set up. And then Kim goes to the internal IT department, and he suggests this new Bluetooth system that he read about, and together they decide to buy this thing and to test it. And it's very fast. They probably have it in a couple of weeks. Both these things, they're carried out. The last example for now. One day at lunch, Mary talked with the others about how much they love building Lego. But the big sets are so expensive and take up so much space when they are built. So she came up with the idea of a Lego library. They all agreed that this was a good idea. And Mary, she sends out a poll on Slack to see if there's any interest in this, and also to find out which Lego sets could be popular. And then she ordered the sets. And it is quite popular, I can tell you. I think we have like, I don't know, 10, 15 big sets that you can borrow. So all these are examples where the decisions are made close to the competence. They're also very fast track. Of course, sometimes things take time also in our organization, but it's seldom because of the decision process. It's more because of whatever decision is going to take, and maybe people don't feel that hard for it. So, a question, raise of hands. How many of you have given up trying to carry out a small change or big, but mostly small changes in your organization? Maybe even before you ever told them to somebody. Yeah, so that's about half. So, in my opinion, the decision taking is actually the backbone of how we do things in Vertica. We take decisions all the time, small decisions and big decisions, and this actually trains us to take the bigger decisions. But it also trains us in not taking decisions. For someone like me, who's been used to taking decisions all the time, when people come ask me for something, I'm just doing things for them and helping them out, because that's also what managers do. So what you also are trained to do is to not take the decision and maybe bring in other people and let them involve other people to take decisions as well. So we train this all the time. And it makes us feel that we're in control and can affect our workplace. So, to be happy, research states that these 3 factors are present. If they are present, you will perform better at your work or your school, and you will also feel better. So, the first one, autonomy. So, feeling in control or being in control of your work. Feeling that you have an influence and that you can affect things and take decisions that make things better. That's autonomy. Competence or mastery. Being confident that you can actually solve the work that you're given. Also that someone is expecting, and that someone is happy with you and happy with the work that you do, and also that they want your opinion on things. The last one, relatedness. So being part of a group, feeling respecting others, that you are involved in decisions that affect you. So these 3 factors lead to better performance. The problem with hierarchies. Solving complex tasks is a job for experts. Complex tasks are characterized by having unknown unknowns. That's not something I found out. There are some references in the bottom. You should definitely seek them out if you don't know them. So developing software is in this domain, the complex domain. we humans, it's the second one is, we humans tend to reduce new problems into problems we already know. The third one, complexity is handled badly in hierarchies. So the first one, in Snowden's canoeing terminology, the method for solving complex tasks are characterized by there is no right way to do it, and that the problem consists of a lot of unknown unknowns. Does this sound familiar to you? For me, this is very much like a lot of the work we do in software development. The second one, we humans tend to reduce new problems into problems we already know. This is an observation by Kahneman. And he claims that we do this all the time, mostly even without noticing. So maybe if you remember the talk this morning, there were things where we were just reacting underneath the thinking thing. And this is where we do this. We just react with, we see a problem and we think about it as something we know, even though we actually don't. And since most managers are humans, they do this all the time as well. The third one, complexity is handled badly in hierarchies. This is from the book Reinventing Organizations, where Frédéric Laloux, he goes through the history of organizations, and in the end he examines a lot of organizations that has different organization and structures, mostly flat ones in some way. And his conclusion is that complexity is handled badly in hierarchies. Of course, I should say that hashtag not all managers tend to jump to conclusions, but managers are typically not experts in all the areas they cover. But they're used to having the answers, and it's probably expected of them to have answers. And then they also get in the habit of just giving an answer. Of course, sometimes you'll always also have that it can be a good thing to reduce a problem into something more simple, because then you can sort of look at it in another way and you can maybe spare about the problem. But if you just reduce a problem to something less complex and sort of gives the answer to the wrong question, I don't know if any of you can have experienced this. I know that I have managers who do this. So you have to be very aware that you're actually doing this reducing problems things. But I hope you get the point. Hierarchies are not the only solution for an organization, and maybe not the best one. So what is the solution? Well, this is our organization diagram. Stay with me. I know it's a bit strange. But we have problems with drawing our organizational diagram, since normally they're like graphs with leaves and hierarchies, and maybe another hierarchy that merges into the first hierarchy, and very complicated. So we tried this one. I'll explain it to you. So first we have the self-managing customer teams. That's the X. That's where the value is. That's what gives us money. They're nice and secure in the tray. This is an example. As I told you before, we have 16 customer teams at the moment. We only have 6 here. These are examples of some of our teams. Søstrene Grene, Bolia, Molslinjen, Normal, Brødrene Dahl, Hørkram, some of our customer teams. So what does an egg look like? Well, you have the customer team, and it's self-contained, like an egg. Okay, but so in the customer team, we have a front end, we have back end, design, architecture, project management, UX, lead development. And some of these roles are overlapping, so normally our teams are like 4 to 8 persons. But they are fixed teams. They are project teams or product teams, and the norm is that you're only allocated to one team. If you wish to change your team, this is possible. You can say it to the allocation group, and they're the responsible for the allocations, and they will take your wish into account when something is changing, or when it's possible, basically. Okay, so we have the support groups. These are in the tray. For example, administration, organization group, IT and security. The people in these groups are dedicated to these functions. It's their job, So we have about 15 people in these supporting functions, and not everybody's full-time, so I think it's about 11 full-time employees that we have in these support functions. But also in the X-ray, we have the organizational development groups. The members of these groups are employees with special interests or roles, and they come from the X, but also from the support functions. So beside their work in the teams or in other groups, they support the organization in these groups by taking decisions or developing the organizations, and each group has like a certain focus. This is strange. I would have expected something else to happen. Well, we'll just take them all three here. First, we have the tech driver group. I mentioned them earlier. They discuss the technical strategy for example, the technical debt or technology. We have the delivery group. The delivery group is a special group here because it's a cross-organizational group, and all teams and relevant organizational groups are represented here, together with the salespeople. We meet once a week, and decisions and informations and suggestions that has to do with the organization is handled here. For example, we decide here to make a policy about work from home, and I can tell you that we prefer that people go to the office. But we also do like monitor illness across the organization and other stuff like that. Another decision this group has made just before I started was to stop all sales for 6 months. There had been some pushback from the teams that they thought they were under too much pressure, and they were being too much reallocation because of new projects and stuff. So they decided, let's not have any sales for the next 6 months. I think this was a very brave decision to do for a private company. And then we have the career coaches. Let's talk a bit more about them. First, let's meet Pete. Pete is a developer, and he would like to expand his knowledge, but he don't know in which direction he wants to move. So Pete has a meeting coming up with his career coach, and he decides that this would be a good topic for him to discuss. So in Denmark, most workplaces has MOOS. It's an employee development meeting. It's normally a yearly conversation you have with your manager, and at the meeting you talk about if you reached your goal for the last year, and then you talk about what should be your goal for the next year. This might be a bit high level, but you get the idea. In my experience, you often at these meetings ends up talking about the last week or maybe the last 2 weeks, because that's what you can remember and that's what actually matters for you. And that seems the most relevant. And then you make plans for something that you know will change anyways. So we don't have managers, so we can't do this. Damn. So what do? We have career coaching. So everybody has a career coach. The coaches get special training. Each coach is coaching 2 to 5 colleagues. They're coaching a colleague to develop their work life in the directions best suited for Vertica. And 30 out of the 130 colleagues are career coaches. The career coach role is something that you sign up for. Sometimes you're asked if somebody thinks that you would be good at it. So it's something that you do voluntarily. I don't know if you're familiar with the coaching method, but basically it's a dialogue where the coach helps you to stay in the problem you're seeking to solve by asking some questions. This helps the coachee to focus on the problem and not thinking too much about the solution. And then, of course, in the end, together with the coach, the coachee and the coach, they find out what should be the next step for me to solve my problem, or to, in Pete's example, to get more experience. In our career coach arrangement, you don't need to have the same background or role as the ones you're coaching. For example, I'm coaching 4 people. There's one from marketing, 2 developers, and a tester. And I'm a project manager, or whatever, Scrum Master thing. And career coaches are often more experienced colleagues, either in the organization or, as in my example, in life. And they can normally help you to find out where should you go in the organization to get feedback or help with whatever you're working on. The frequencies of these meetings are decided between the two. Normally it's twice a year, but in periods it can be less or more, depending on where you are. I should say that besides these career coach meetings, you also have one-on-ones with your project manager and whoever you want to. So it's not the only feedback you get. And you can always ask for more meetings with your career coach if you want to. So there's mostly high satisfaction with this arrangement. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't work out, maybe because the match between the two are not good. And then it's always possible for both sides to say, I would like a different match. And sometimes it's just because the coachee has had the same coach for some years and want to try something new, and that's also very acceptable to do. So, Pete, at his career session, Pete and his coach figures out that it would be a good idea for Pete to go on a 3-day course in microservice architecture, which is situated in Copenhagen. So Pete asked his peers if they think this course would be a good idea for him, and if it's something that they think could be useful for the team, and if it's worth the money. They agree that it's a good idea and that it seems reasonable for Pete to go to Copenhagen with the train and stay at the Scandic Hotel and all that. So Pete writes this information in an Excel sheet for everybody to see. Education is basically handled the same way as other decisions, but there's a bit more information maybe. So the decision about the course is made close to those it affects, his peers. The information is open to everybody. It's written down in an Excel sheet that everybody can go look in. And we have a free budget for education. Also, we have actually some internal courses where each person can say, you know a lot about this, could you maybe make a course? Or I could say, I know a lot about something. Can't really think of something right now, but maybe. And then I can make a course, and these courses are presented on a web page or a Trello board, and then they can be held whenever it fits. So about the courses we do here, I've never heard anybody get a no when they ask their peers about taking a course or staying at some hotel. The discussion of the course is more like a career coach situation where you talk, does this fit for you and going the right direction for Vertica and stuff. But if someone asks you, you mostly say yes. With great power comes great responsibility. I believe that the reason that you normally say yes to for example, education, is that the decision is the responsibility of the one asking. So, and the one asking know this. So they only asked if they actually think that this is a reasonable suggestion. And there's a built-in social control where the trust leads to a higher responsibility, and the openness of the cost and the time prevents you from speculating what are others getting, and also you can just go check it out. And the fact that you know that others are actually seeing what time and money you're spending on your courses, that makes you more thorough with what courses you are actually taking. And it is just a decision like any other. But of course, sometimes we have bad decisions, not about education, but decisions in general. And not everybody agrees with decisions, but there's no silver bullet for this. What we do is just more transparent, and it definitely leads to faster decision making. And sometimes also better decision making, in my opinion. You're probably wondering this as well, I don't know. The salary validation process, this is one of the things that people often ask about. Also, my old friends wanted to know about this. So here, this is a link to an article written in a Danish newspaper called Zetland. They made a series of articles about workplaces that are handling salary in a different way. It says, a boss is not deciding your salary, it's an algorithm and your colleagues. So if you understand Danish, you should check it out. It's quite interesting. And also the other companies, there are 3 companies in this series, but this one is about us. So our process for salary is a bit complicated. It's complicated. So I haven't got time to go into all the details, but feel free to ask me later if you're curious. But the high-level explanation is that each person chooses which colleagues they have worked with in some context the last year and a half, and they feel that they can actually assess. And they have to assess them in these 4 categories: knowledge and experience, innovation and change, productivity and quality, culture and colleagues. Innovation here, for me, that can be a bit an overwhelming word. Actually, in Danish, it's the Danish, I translated it, we say nytænkning. That's the original word. But these are the 4 categories. So when you give the feedback, then the algorithm calculates how much raise you get, and everybody gets some minimum. It might sound disturbing to you, but remember, in a normal salary process, there's always someone assessing you in this salary situation. Here, it's just not one single person or some manager group doing it, but it's actually the people that knows what you're doing. I've been places at least where I had the feeling that my manager didn't exactly know what I was doing. And also, if we think back to the keynote this morning, where Rashid told us about what was the most important thing to be a good colleague, it's more, I think, more included in these categories than what some managers, not all managers, some managers would think. So the key point about this is that your contribution to this process is very small, because everybody typically assess 4 to 15 people. So your contribution to one person's rating in this algorithm is about 1 out of 35. My feeling is that this process is just as good or just as bad as any other salary process I've been involved in on both sides. But I like the fact that we sort of took the one person out of it, and it's more like a thing we do together. So we have no management, but lots of leadership. As I have hopefully shown you, lots of leading and decision-making is happening all the time. Some is distributed, and some is in appointed groups. And actually, on a normal day, it doesn't feel that different. You go to work, and you do some work together with your teammates. But if no one takes the responsibility, then nothing will happen. And the ones affected by this nothing will then have to figure it out, what they should do. For example, if the project managers want to go off-site on a seminar with the full and relevant content, then someone in the group has to sign up to do that, to make that happen. Otherwise, it won't happen. Most of the time, someone is stepping up, and definitely when it's important. Sometimes it takes some time, and sometimes nothing happens. But my experience is that this is also the case in other organizations. Trust. We need to have a lot of trust. That should be the case in all organizations, right? But we need this especially. I just had to read the note young man gave me. We need to trust that people are doing their best and creating value. But also, as I have shown, that we need people to trust to take good decisions. For us to have this organization to keep developing, we need employees that are willing to take the responsibility. We need some percentage of people that has that drive and focus to be a part of an organization besides doing their job in the eggs. The programmer in the corner, you know this guy, I think. But so do we have room for the so-called introverts or whatever we call them? The programmer that feels most comfortable in not having to speak in gatherings and such. I say we definitely have room for those, and we definitely also have some of them. The premise is, of course, that we are self-managing teams, and we need to buy in on that. And we have to make this clear whenever we hire, and we also do that. Not everybody is taking decisions and changing things all the time, and we also need to have colleagues that are just sitting there in the eggs and doing their work. Of course, there's a few requirements that you need to sign in on. You need to be not too uncomfortable seeking feedback. Your career coach will help. You also need, if something goes wrong, something in your personal life or your work life that affects how you manage, you have to reach out to the project manager or the organization team or someone else. Also, you of course have to participate on the team, but I guess that goes for most workplaces. But when it doesn't work out, this is also a question we get a lot. Sometimes it doesn't, and what we do is we try to have an environment where we take care of problems up front. I guess everybody does that. This can sometimes be difficult because no one person has the responsibility, so everybody has the responsibility, and that can be difficult. So because of our organization, we need some structures and routines to secure that this happens. When it doesn't work out, everybody can go to the organizational group to get coaching and facilitation, also when there's a problem between colleagues. All teams have facilitated meetings that takes the temperature on roles and responsibilities. This is beside the retros, and there's someone from outside the team that's facilitating these meetings. But when for some reason things don't go as we hope, we have a process like most other organizations. It starts with a dialogue with the person in question, for example, by someone in the organizational group, and the result of this can be a plan or some agreement of a specific behavior. It can also involve a co-worker, and if things doesn't work out and we have to say goodbye, then a small group of meaningful affected takes the decision and someone is carrying it out. So it's never nice to do. I have never heard someone say this was a really good firing experience nowhere in the world. But we all know that it can be necessary to do this. We could probably do better at this. I think sometimes it takes too long before things are handled. Also, sometimes it might be avoided, but that's probably as everywhere else. So what are the challenges? Business partners. They have other organizations than us, so sometimes that can be difficult relating to them. We're trying to talk about this, but it can be difficult. Sometimes we try to mimic their organization, but it doesn't always work out very good. Size. So the company has grown from familiar size, where everybody knows everybody and the names and stuff, to a size where you don't know everybody. The challenge is the way we do things. So sometimes we have to adjust about the groups and the routines, and there's some latency before we found out that we actually have to do this. We're trying to have a conversation about this, but it's difficult. We also have a lot of social events to try to prevent some of this. Informal hierarchies, knowledge hierarchies, social hierarchies, you probably have some of those as well. It's a bit worse when we have them, I think, or it's probably more of a challenge if you have someone with a higher seniority and their meaning has a higher weight, and that can be frustrating for some. So we try to have, for example, the cross-organizational groups to have some of these conversations. Evolving culture. So culture is all the time evolving, and that's a good thing. But it can be tricky when you are as depending on culture as we are. We're trying to have a focus on this as well, but it's definitely a challenge. And again, the latency in the organization can have the effect that sometimes it takes too long. For example, recently we changed the way we measure employee satisfaction from every 6 months to every 2 months to try to come on top of some of these things. So, 130 people with no bosses. We have challenges just like other organizations, some of the same, some are different, some I think we actually fixed. But what I love, and I also said this in the beginning, is that if there's something that I or someone else want to change, I can. I can do something about it, and for me, that's a big thing. It's a difference, and I feel I have more influence here than I ever had in any other place, also when I was manager. So, we're not 130 people without buses, we're 130 buses. Thank you.